Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome back to another edition of the Infection Podcast. Also, welcome back to America. My name is Nick Craig. You can follow me on X at Nicholas M. Craig, or, of course, check out our website, infectionpodcast.com. Mr. I with an Aldridge, Brian, how's it going, my friend?
It is going great. And if you want to find me, of course, you can find me at Boise Computer on X or at Brian Aldridge on other places, which, hey, they may continue to exist. It seems like everything in this last, we've been talking about Lena Khan. I mean, we've still got some cool things.
We got some Lena Khan. We need to get into because
constantly things getting shut down, and it's going to be a very different couple months, I think, going forward than this whole year has been. They're shutting down the federal investigations into Trump. I mean,
because they can no longer prosecute him. He's going to be
once he's president,
president.
They can't prosecute him. Yeah. And so it's crazy. What a change in 24 hours, because prior to the numbers, 4 years ago, I felt the same way as I did going into this one. Right.
Oh, I did not at all.
Confident. Well, I was confident, like, it seemed like the numbers were really good. Everything was working. And, then when it happened, it's like, even through most of the night, it was like until that thing in the morning, and then everything fell apart. And that created a situation where no one trusted the election. I think this time it was done in a way where I haven't heard anyone really questioning, other than maybe Arizona, the fact that they're not counting ballots anymore. And they're whatever they're doing down there. But I haven't heard that anything about, really crazy stuff happening. Both sides have seemed to have accepted the results of the election, right? And we'll go forward. I've seen a lot of liberals saying, "Oh, but we're gonna, accept the results." Where in any place was there something done by people that are on the right to try to cheat votes, and that you can show any hint of it happening? There's nowhere. That's why it's so easy to concede, because there's zero questions on one side of the aisle versus the other that I ever hear, other than it's just not fair. They changed the zoning laws or something, and that's their complaints, how the courts handled it, not how people.
So to get a little on kind of on track, on brand with some of this stuff. Obviously, the 2024 election was last night for we know we have a good chunk of our audience that is not in the United States. President Trump was successful in winning re-election. But, it was interesting, Brian, as we've watched the events of the last couple of weeks, it's been really interesting to watch figures, and I don't want to have an overly political conversation about it, but it is interesting to see, Elon Musk, the Joe Rogan Experience, Theo Vaughn, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago. Aiden Ross.
There's one other group that did it too. I hadn't really heard of them, but I recognize their picture.
It's very interesting to see how technology and, in years past, any major media outlet, and I'll use a bad analogy, but would literally give their left nut to have 3.5 hours to sit down with a vice presidential candidate, a presidential candidate. Yeah, and Joe Rogan, within the span of like 9 days, had Trump, J.D. Vance, and Elon Musk all on the Joe Rogan Experience. And I think it's showing...
huge numbers for all of them. I mean, Trump's was the biggest, like 44 million or something at least. I'm trying to remember what the numbers ended up being.
Yeah.
But, I mean, these weren't small podcasts. There was nothing that Kamala did in any of hers that were near those numbers.
Trump at 46 million, J.D. Vance at 15 million, and Elon Musk at 12 million.
Yeah. So, I mean, there you go.
So it's, we obviously we've been doing this show for 497 episodes. Many years at this time. I kind of early, not early to the podcast game, but definitely early to the kind of show that that we started producing back all those years ago. And to me, the real winner of this election cycle is non-traditional media. Now, I work in traditional media. I have a 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. radio show. But that show is also streamed live on YouTube. that show is also made available in podcast form so that people can listen to it on demand. So while it is by many folks it would be considered traditional media, it's not the same kind of traditional media that, or legacy media as you'll call it, that really is the big loser of everything. And I'm encouraged and looking forward 4 years from now, what impact is social media? X, if Elon Musk continues to own it, who knows? He could divest it and spin it off and sell it to somebody. Who knows? What will shows like Joe Rogan, will there be new shows, that come to the caliber of something like a Joe Rogan? How will those continue to play into the political landscape? And to me, that's a super interesting conversation. And it's obvious that new media was the winner in this election cycle. And with Trump and his close connection with Musk, and obviously Elon owning X, it's gonna make for a couple of interesting years for Trump's final term, 24 to 28. In those years, it's or 25 technically, but it's gonna make things very interesting over the next couple of years, and it's kind of tangentially related to some of the things that we discuss and talk about with new media.
Well, and here's an example. I have this story. It's kind of a random one, but it's from PC Magazine, and the title is Elon Musk uses Starlink access in North Carolina to slam FCC and support Trump.
Yeah, 100%. That's accurate.
And their byline says, the effort to correct those affected by Hurricane Helene via Starlink turns political as Musk takes shots at the FCC for denying federal subsidies to SpaceX. Well, this is an example of that, to where, I mean, look at how many ways they take these type of articles. He was seeing something that the government wasn't doing, and he's like, well, let's do it. I mean, the government has been coming against him nonstop. Do they mention that, that with the broadband bill and all these things that could have done, that's where the talk. This is a very accurate article. That's one thing that is a little bit different from PC Magazine. It seems like they've been changing it and getting a little bit closer with some of these stories. But this is because of the person in government. They didn't like Elon Musk, so they screwed the United States citizens out of billions of dollars doing research and not even delivering a product, right? I mean, all because they didn't like this person politically. They were willing to not give the best to the American people. And that's what we've been in, but we never hear about these things from the media up until recently. Now that they're seeing the writing on the wall that they might have been losing. Like, it seems like until recently, they never talked about the lawfare in any kind of a negative way. It was us who couldn't accept things.
So the context of what you're talking about is this rural broadband bill that was part of the well-named, of course, Inflation Reduction Act, where the government spends hundreds of billions of dollars. And they wanted, what are you laughing at? The cat in the background?
No. What you said.
So the federal government chose physical internet providers, the likes of Spectrum, Verizon, Comcast, Cox, whatever the provider, AT&T. They chose them because those guys can physically bury fiber and physically connect a cable from a pole or a box in the ground to somebody's house. The federal government chose them to lead rural infrastructure rollouts of broadband internet instead of Starlink and space and SpaceX to do that. And that's, I think, one of the big turning points for Elon Musk in when he realized did you listen to the Rogan interview?
I've only gone through part of them. I haven't had time to listen because we were gone so much.
Sure,
but I started the beginning of them.
He mentions,
I listened to the Trump one, but not the other two all the way.
He mentions during that he was never really an overtly political guy, and for somebody that watching Tesla grow from what it was, that's an accurate statement. Elon Musk was not overtly political, and unfortunately for him, he's been on the wrong side of so many things. During the Joe Rogan interview, he talks about how it takes 2, 3, 4 months to get some permits for the government for rocket launches. He goes, we can build the rocket quicker from scratch than it takes for the federal government to sign a damn piece of paper to give us the authorization to launch it. And so you've got individuals like him that are truly revolutionary individuals, and he has unfortunately had to bear the brunt of the most inefficient group of individuals in the world, which is the federal government, and has had to just deal with that constantly, whether it's SpaceX or Tesla with the NTSB, or NASA when it comes to SpaceX and what they're doing there. He is just constantly dealing with this uphill battle against the government, and it essentially red-pilled him, I think, is really what it came down to. And of course, all the Twitter file stuff and the fact that he had to literally buy a company that wasn't worth anywhere near what he paid for it because the federal government was manipulating the platform for the benefit of their political allies. And so did Elon Musk use Starlink in the situation in North Carolina, not very far from here, to slam the FCC? Absolutely. Should he have slammed the FCC? Absolutely. Because what they chose to do was go with the group that has bigger pockets lobbying, and that was the major telecom providers, gave them essentially a bunch of blank checks to dig and bury a bunch of fiber all over the freaking place with no customers, because that's what that is.
And that's the issue. So they claim that Starlink wasn't able to meet the basic uplink and download speed
Bullshit
standard for their program. Probably all it was is they found places that don't have people yet, and they hadn't rolled out all the satellites to that particular area yet, right? That's a possibility, but they get 100 megabit. I mean, he's getting gigabit once they roll out the new. They get approved for the new level.
Who cares about gigabit? I mean, 10 megabits. Didn't they just change?
They can give 100 minimum to everybody if they wanted to. Like, how's that not acceptable?
I did a radio show from a hotel this morning, streamed it live on YouTube, and used an AOIP audio codec on 5 megabits symmetrical via Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
And so the idea that individuals that are stuck with twisted pair DSL for internet, which is essentially what you have access to in most rural areas if you don't have access to either a WISP, some sort of wireless local ISP, or something like Starlink, your maximum connection you're getting is maybe 15 megabits down, and if you're lucky, maybe 3 megabits up. That's on like the best of days. So it's absurd, but it's just, of course, whatever the excuse might be, that was another mistake that they made. And speaking of mistakes, Brian, this transitions us very well into one of our favorite people who I'm so glad to see will be leaving her position and losing her job at essentially the turn of the calendar. That is the disastrous head of the Federal Trade Commission, Lina Khan. Last week, we weren't on last week, but the Republican or the House Oversight Committee released this cover sheet. The Federal Trade Commission under Chair Lina Khan undid Biden-Harris White House influencing and sweeping destruction of agency norms. And so they released this report, this House Committee on Oversight and Accountability, just lambasting Lina Khan and what she did as the head of the FTC. And I'll go through some of the reports. James Comer's the chairman of this. He's no slouch, no noob to politics. Here are a couple of the things that they say. Chair Khan has trampled on the principles of due process, respect for the rule of law, and ethical standards to achieve her ideologically fueled ends at the FTC. Chair Khan has forsaken commission's independence and bipartisanship to lead the Biden-Harris White House's left-wing whole-of-government campaign to reshape American antitrust and competition policy. We have documented that very well on this show. Chair Khan has swept aside principles, practices, and policies of merger reviews, ones that had served pro-consumer and pro-competitive interests for decades, to launch an intimidation campaign to kill mergers of all kind. We've talked about that.
That's happening here locally with Kroger Albertsons.
Mm-hmm.
That's Albertsons was started here in Idaho in the Boise area. And that merger, they were making them sell hundreds of locations. And this is something my wife and I were talking about. Why to do a merger to try to compete with the likes of Walmart's? Would they have to sell locations? They have way less locations than a Walmart. So like how does that work? Why do they need to size them down to make them compete in the market this government wants them to compete in? It's the weirdest situation, and it didn't make any sense to me. And I think they're holding out and waiting to do this merger probably until Lena Khan is gone, and these people in government that have these ideological things that they get chasing. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. It doesn't come down to the best of the government for the people. It's their ideology and their anti-business and whatever it is that shapes how they view. They're chasing that,
It is
regardless of
anti-business.
how it damages your business, other people's livelihoods. I mean, they tried to stop the merger of Activision Blizzard into
Absolutely.
Microsoft, right? I mean, no one else other than one place in Europe, the UK, I think, um, was giving him flack. And that was it. The CWA, I'm trying to remember it's been a while since we listed off all those different organizations, but they did everything they could to prevent that, even pushing it when it didn't make sense anymore, even when they had lost, because as we've said for a long time, this is a religion. The politics is a religion to some people. This way of thinking is a religion to some people. Some people let their religion influence the way they vote. Some people, their voting is their religion, right? And I think that's what this is. This way of thinking is their core belief and foundation, and everything that they do is driven by that, rather than compartmentalizing and having faith, but also having the ability to make that not negatively affect others, right? That's the balance. You can believe in something, but there's a point where it starts to harm someone else. That's where you have to figure out where that line is. And
And
for
that's
them,
what
there is
this
no line. They just let it go.
there isn't, and that's what this House Oversight and Accountability Report looks into. It's a lengthy document. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I've read through the entirety of the document, because it is 59 pages, and I have not done that. But having watched Lena Khan and watched her,
Mhm.
and it's so funny in all of this. Yes, it talks about the things that she's failed to do and how she was essentially doing the political bidding of the White House. Nowhere in here does it mention the amount of money, taxpayer dollars, that was lost in these, what I will describe as frivolous legal battles that the vast majority of the time led to nothing. And you've got a situation right now, like you're describing, where you essentially have seen mergers and acquisitions, M&As, have essentially stopped. Because any
the ridiculous things that they're
because they just
from them.
It's not even that they require. They just know absolutely the second they announce a merger or an acquisition that the Federal Trade Commission under Lena Khan is going to go after them, and they don't want to have to deal with the litigation. So and because again, you're going up against a group of individuals that have, put it in quotes, but unlimited resources, which is the government, because money is not an object, time is not an object. There is no such thing as like sunk cost fallacy within the government. They will spend as much to get to their ends and their means, no matter what. So Lena Khan is a disaster. She's been a disaster, and I look forward to her being replaced as the head of the Federal Trade Commission come probably mid to late January, early February, depending on when those new positions can be appointed. So great news for business, especially the tech industry. I can't wait, Brian, to watch Twit this weekend and see what they have, because they were gushing, the group over This Week in Tech were gushing over Lena Khan when I made the terrible decision to watch it a couple of weeks ago, about how she's a stalwart and how both folks on both sides of the political aisle just love her. She's awful. And I look forward to her being gone, and hopefully companies can do what they do. And again, if the Federal Trade Commission does have to step in, it's in a situation in which consumers are genuinely being hurt, not the federal government picking winners and losers and just trying to be a pain in the ass, which is what they do best.
Here's one that is just recently passed by the FTC. And we haven't really talked about this. I think there were hints that it was coming. fake online reviews and false testimonials are now banned by the FTC. This kind of creates a problem. This one thing that this is really hitting on is possibly review bombing. Uh, and what is review bombing? That's my problem. Is how do you define it? Is when a lot of people don't like a product or a film because of the content, and they go and negatively put a rating on that. Just because a lot of people do it at once doesn't mean it's a review bombing, right?
No,
There
but,
are
but
versions
hold
of
on, bro.
review bombing
I think you're being
that exist.
disingenuous. I think you know exactly what a review bomb is. A
Well,
review
but
bomb
that's
is
the
when
thing. How do they decide what that is?
I think it's pretty obvious. I mean, when you look at, for
Well, but
example,
but obvious in the law, don't
uh,
there you've got to have a line that of where obvious is. That's
I
what I
don't
want to know. Where's that line?
I don't disagree with you, and that's a very valid point that I'm not going to try and dispute. But I mean, the idea to me when you're looking at what is a review bomb, for example, Trump stopped at that McDonald's in wherever he was a couple weeks ago. You go on Google, and that McDonald's now has a 1-star review from a bunch of people that do not live in that area, that have never been to that McDonald's, leaving reviews. The same thing that happens with television and movie ratings. A new Star Wars comes out and it has a trans character. A bunch of people that have not watched the show, and obviously that's not the IMDb and stuff is not that's not the main issue. It's of course online shopping and things like that. But a new show comes out, it's got something woke, so a bunch of idiot Star Wars nerds on YouTube, Nerdrotic and that whole group of morons, and go to IMDb and write out 10 paragraphs on how they hate Star Wars and how Disney's ruining the world, and then go and roll their hang out in their mom's basement eating Uncrustables. It's like, that's what review bombing is, and it's both sides do it. I mean, for as much as we're like, oh yeah, this is bad. Anytime anything quote unquote woke happens, you have a bunch of soy boy conservatives that have run to a review site to trash it because they're idiots. Yeah. Like specifically like the Nerdrotic people who are beyond stupid. I mean, they're literally man children. They're idiots.
And I think what they don't see is that is not as effective as something like what Grumley does. Rather than him saying you should go and vote down on these. I mean, maybe he does that as well. But he will go and post and say, here's what I don't appreciate about, this game or about this company. And he'll bring the facts.
Sure.
And he'll let the facts speak for themselves. And I think that that's what has made him more effective than a lot of people have been in the past when they're more attacking. They say, well, let's attack. He doesn't try to attack them. He just tries to shine light, which a lot of times when you shine light on something like that, it ends up kind of looking embarrassing to them. Because it's easy when everybody accepts it. The whole emperor has no clothes thing is, as long as everybody's acting like it's all cool, right? It's not weird. I mean, it's weird for them individually, but no one's showing it, right?
So they give some examples of what you're describing here, and I think this makes sense. Fake or false customer reviews and testimonials, including those from celebrities. Okay, that makes sense. Yep. The next one is the biggest. The buying of positive and negative reviews. And that's a big one.
Like
I don't know,
Amazon, because a lot of times they'll send out a free product for review. Is that cutting those out?
So it should cut those out. And I'm going to be honest. I used to get a lot of those. Actually, this tumbler that I'm drinking out of was because I bought a mirror for my shower, and the company said, write us a review and we'll send you a free tumbler. So they did. Or I did, and they did, in fact, send me the tumbler that's probably coated with BPA or something like that. I hope that stuff does stop, because... Now, let me be clear. The mirror that I bought for my shower did work, but I had zero interest and was not going to leave a review myself. Why? Because I just don't do reviews. It's just not something I have any interest in doing. So I think that actually is a good thing. As much as I benefited from it, I've gotten a whole bunch of free crap from just writing a 3-sentence Amazon review on something that I bought. Insider reviews, that makes sense. Company controlled review sites, that's a big one. Now, if you're on Amazon and looking at reviews, that's one thing. But if you go to Google and say, whatever product, iPhone 17 Plus.
What's that one, Glass, where you can go talk about your old company, like where you
Glassdoor?
Glassdoor. Would that be under this?
No. It's saying
review sites, or is it by the company that's selling the product?
So that would be the equivalent of typing into Google and saying iPhone 17 Max review, and the first website is amazingiPhoneReviews.com, and it's controlled and run by Apple. So that would be
Okay.
that would be a site control.
Yeah,
That
you
would
would
be a
still want to have a
company.
place where people can go and give reviews and rank
Yes.
things and not have that be
Uh,
outlawed.
Review suppression, obviously that's hard to deal with, and then the misuse of fake social media indicators for reviews. So some of that stuff tends to make a lot of sense. Here's the reality, though. I don't for 1 second believe that any of these things are actually going to help consumers. Because most of this stuff, as you noted at the top, Ryan, is going to be so impossible to even figure out and then go through the process of prosecuting somebody on,
right?
is
They're
absurd.
thought crimes almost to a point.
Well,
I mean,
they're not.
it
They're
was
not thought
it was your
crimes.
mindset at the time that determines whether or not it was a crime, not the action necessarily that you did. I mean, if you're leaving a review, they're going to determine whether or not you were real about it, right? How are they going to, other than unless you're doing it totally trolly to where it's super obvious? There's people who are going to be caught up in that, leaving a review that are going to be rejected because, obviously you're a troll. That's what I'm worried about. And like AI generated fake reviews, I can understand that. That's going to be hard to,
Yeah,
how are they going to determine
stop.
what's fake and real?
This is not the goal and the role of the federal government. Let Amazon deal with this. Let eBay deal with this. Let Walmart
have
and
Google
other
filter them out, right?
You don't need Google to do it. Why would the company?
Well, I'm paying for search results.
Here's the thing, though. Amazon does not want their review pages filled up with a bunch of fake reviews. Why? Mm-hmm. Because then people stop trusting the reviews on Amazon. And that is something that Amazon, contrary to what people might think, actually cares about, because that is the one big thing that makes Amazon makes it the most unbelievable buying platform that you can imagine. Not only is everything dirt cheap, which those prices are likely going to go up, not only is everything dirt cheap, but at the same time, the reviews between the pictures, videos, and the text reviews and the star ratings just work really, really well. So why the hell would the Federal Trade Commission need to be involved in this?
Yeah,
like that's
they want to
the
be involved
issue.
in it. So
It's absurd.
They did another rule where the FTC's click to cancel rule. So they want to have it to where you can click to cancel instantly on almost everything, right?
I understand that one as well. Yeah.
We've got some companies that are coming forward saying, well, this doesn't work for our business model. I mean, whether it be cell phone companies, where if you have a subscription, but you've got a phone, I mean, that totally kills all those things where you're on the plan as long as you're paying for that phone at maybe a discounted rate or something. You can't do that anymore because they have to be allowed to cancel their thing without any penalties at any time. Right. So that gets rid of all of those ways of doing those kind of perks, which, I mean, isn't the end of the world, but there's certain companies that their business models are more formed on something like this. You'll pay it for over the length of your subscription so that you don't have to buy something up front, all at a big cost.
This is just another thing where it's like, can it be kind of a pain to cancel a subscription? Yes. Is it impossible to cancel a subscription? No, it is not. While it might take a little bit, and I say a little bit, and I mean a little bit, while it might take a little bit of time, even something like a gym membership can be canceled, and it's not overly complicated. You just have to put in a little bit of effort. And once again, is this the need of the Federal Trade Commission and the U.S. consumer? And the answer unequivocally is no. This is not what I want.
This is what they've been worrying about.
I know, and that's the issue. It's like inherently when I think, click to cancel, making it easier to cancel a product, or not a product, of course, a service. Sounds great. I mean, it would be nice if things could be easily canceled. At the same time, I don't want the government deciding what is determined as easy for that. I'm sorry. I'm not an anti-government guy. I'm not some weird, don't tread on snake guy that votes for Chase Oliver for president or whatever. But this is not what I want my government doing. There's got to be something better for the Federal Trade Commission to be dealing with than click to cancel and fake freaking reviews on Amazon. There's got to be something there has, and me as a consumer, there's got to be something more important that is affecting me than that. And if the answer is that it's not, then we seriously need to look at why does the Federal Trade Commission even exist?
Well, okay, so here's something that the U.S. Copyright Office ruled here recently
Okay.
that more likely will affect you at some point or will prevent you. So they've ruled that libraries can't access old games remotely because of market harm and recreational use risk. Because people are trying to figure out how do we save some of these old games, get where people can play them again.
We
So
talked
maybe
about
have it to
ROMs
where
a couple weeks ago, like all these old
yeah,
ROMs. Yeah.
and how this could be a substantial market for older video games to be able to be played, right?
But it's not.
Well,
There is no
there
market.
there is no market. That's what I'm saying. There hasn't been one, and so but that's their claim is that if there was a market, this would be harm
If
to
there
that
was a
market
market, then people wouldn't be having to do what they're doing, but there is no
to play
market.
any old ROM. Exactly. That's the weird thing is so you don't want library because that'd be a way for it to prevent piracy, right? If the libraries
Spotify is
control
the
it, it's gonna,
greatest example of this. I mean, I just like
Mhm.
literally music piracy essentially no longer exists because of
almost stop.
Spotify,
Yeah.
Pandora, and Apple Music Plus. It essentially doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. And so here, libraries would come up with a way to allow people to rent access to an old video game and play it for a period of time, right? And that could happen.
Sure.
Well, what service is being sold that would compete against that? I mean, there's
Game
individual
Pass?
devices you can get. No, I'm talking about like for ROMs. This is for
There
like
isn't.
old games. Yeah,
Yeah,
as I'm saying,
yeah, but
there's
there's a reason. But
they're worried about that market, but no one has taken advantage of it in this whole time and really done it right and tried to make a online arcade
because you can't. There's too many
because of all the
stakeholders. It's not practical. Half of these companies don't even exist anymore. So I mean, there's no
but
or
renting
there
with a library would work because of doing the system. If they allowed them to do
it would not though. How are you have to get for example, when you own a library,
if they had licenses
but
they had their licenses.
that's the key. It's like even your public library with the book, they can't go to the local Barnes and Noble, steal the book off the shelf, and then put it in the library. They have to pay for
They
it
have to be
and
able
put
to
it in.
and so
They purchase it and then,
but what
then
about
they
all
rent
these
it to
games
you.
where there's nowhere to buy them?
That's the issue. That's why this whole thing doesn't work because none of these companies want to. There's no money to be
Which means
made
that those
in a
games
ROM
end up
from 30 years ago.
but if everybody follows the law, those things are all dead and gone and
Cor-
they'll disappear and they won't
Absolutely.
exist anymore. It's
Yeah,
like
that's yeah.
people are trying to come in and say, "Well, what are we going to do to save the ROM industry, like the ROMs? What are we going to do to save the old games that don't have, unless people are able to take them and try to make them run, they disappear." The only reason that some of these games are still around is because people came up with emulators and they could continue playing them. Then they started playing them on little devices. And then I have a whole arcade system set up for it, right? This is something
Legally
that,
purchased ROMs, you should say.
of course, yes, in a fully legal arcade bin. And this is something that they
I'll
should
be right back.
really.
I gotta grab some water. I'll be right back. Go
All
for
right,
it.
yeah, and this is something I think that they really need to take thought of now, before these systems that hold these old hard drives, these old wherever they're storing these things are lost. And if they had a place that say, "Hey, you can archive your game here," and then people continue playing it, but they won't be able to steal your license, that would open up that to where maybe you get some people that did have access to that either the licenses or the old code. They have the ability to permit a license or something, could allow it to be enjoyed again. And then that's my concern is that right now there's no way going forward that it's going to continue being enjoyed for a lot of these games, and only the inner circles of piracy are keeping these games alive in any way. And I just don't think that's right. And so,
The blame needs to be put on the companies, and in some cases, you look at a company like Activision. They have purchased so many companies, small companies, in the last 30 years.
Yep.
They have no interest, and there's no economic incentive. I mean, that's what this comes down to.
Data gets shelved and archived and all kinds of things when you do all those mergers that they did. Probably finding some of that code would be difficult.
It's not even finding the code. The ROMs are already out there. There's just no economic incentive for any of these companies. Nintendo's the greatest example of this. They have all this old IP. You can't legally unless you have the physical cartridge, you can't legally play Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games anywhere. There is no Nintendo has a marketplace. They don't
Yeah.
bother putting those games up there because it's not worth it. So this sucks because there's no economic incentive to do it. The companies don't want to do it, and the only way to play any of these games is literally piracy. Like
And that's the
going out
thing.
and purchasing a Game Boy.
If they could create something where there can be some sort of a license that gets paid to the holder through a system like this, it would incentivize some people maybe going and trying to find the rights to some of these different
Maybe.
games and purchasing the rights, because then they can get a residual income just from these different libraries paying a license fee to be able to allow that game to be played in their system. Right? If that was a possibility, that would be a way. That's gamifying, right, the system, making it so that there's a reason for someone to go and try to own the rights to it rather than letting it sit and die, because that can be like real estate, right? That would be a market that people would chase if you gave them a place to where they could make money off it, just like Netflix, Pandora, all this old music, even some music or videos, let's say on Netflix, maybe ones that aren't super popular on some of these streaming services, they're bringing in income again for the first time in a long time, because they haven't been available for sale or whatever. They're on these services and they're getting money for when people play their videos,
Mm-hmm.
because the same thing could be true for video games. And if there was a place that they could legally put those things and be a market to where it was like a Netflix, but for ROMs, I bet you people would say, "Hey, where do I need to go get a license for this?" I think people would play it on this if I could go find the license, and they'll go find the people, find the companies, and dig these licenses out and sell them, right? Like make profit off of them. Like that's the kind of solution, rather than a lot of these, that we've been seeing now of, let's just not allow it altogether. What about the harm that is bringing on? That's what I don't see answers for. uh, you know, like here, the Video Game History Foundation, they expressed its disappointment in the ruling, blaming industry lobbyists and major industry forces like the Entertainment Software Association for
Mm-hmm.
swaying the Copyright Office's decision and blocking progress, but it resolves to continue the fight. The Game History Foundation is trying to figure out a way to legally have an archive of all these games so that all this history isn't lost, because film, it's not really lost, but the software code will be. And ROMs, you only have the one version of it, which I guess is what we're going to have to be happy with once copyright runs out. But that's what, 100 years down the road. It's a
Yeah.
long time.
It sucks. And maybe there will be some incentive at some point. It just doesn't exist right
It's
now.
just that the market isn't there yet to
Yeah,
incentivize this.
which
And like,
sucks.
if they'd loosen the reins a little bit, it could be like this could have been the doorway to someone seeing hey, we can make money off of this concept. Like, let's figure it out and do it. But they're blocking
Well, let's do
the whole base from even starting
how to play old ROMs legally.
legally.
Reddit post, Quora article, How to Geek. Nope, doesn't exist. So there you go.
Yeah. So, and here's video game history. Today, the U.S. Copyright Office announced that it would not support the need of libraries and archives to increase access to video game history, leaving over 87% of classic games legally inaccessible through any practical means.
That's it right there. Yep.
That's what it is. That's what I've been like pushing at recently. I've been hinting at this just because it's been probably by these guys making it more aware. But we're losing, and being a programmer, like I understand that once you don't have access to some of these things, like once some code gets deleted, sometimes that's it. You're starting from scratch. And these ROMs are cool, but it's like the baked version of a cake. You'll never make a fresh cake again or fix it, right? Um, I'd like to see something for the source code, but that's, I think, going to be a battle down the road. We're just trying to get the ROMs themselves to be legally playable, and they're not allowing that to happen. I think that the archives and libraries, archive.org, that would have been an excellent way for people to go play some of these games that are not playable anywhere else.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but yeah, it's kind of sad. All right. Do you have a preference where we go from here?
No,
Certain
not
topics?
not particularly.
All right.
Yeah, no, not particularly.
Okay, so let's talk here. I want to talk about the economy since this is a little bit of a political show.
Oh, you don't
I
say.
saw this. I saw this something really interesting. Around 21% of European games professionals have been laid off in the past year.
Wow, that's a really
Like
high
21,
percentage.
21%. So most of those affected have secured new jobs, some outside the game industry. So there are jobs to move to for the most part. But yeah, these things, like I don't understand how people don't think what got us here, like what got us to this point. A lot of what people don't realize and accept is the fake funding, the false promotion of certain studios for DEI credits was a lot of the reason that we got here. Because when the money started running out and we start coming up to an election year and they start cutting their budgets so they don't look so bad in the final year, those things got cut and there wasn't money anymore. That's part of the reason this happened. Um, they're finding that there's a lot of layoffs in HR and recruitment, Q&A, artists. Uh, with the move to AI for art, that is becoming more and more common. They don't want to say it because, you got certain groups of people that freak out about it. QA, that's been the most politically active pain in the necks for most of these game studios.
Mm-hmm.
Their Q&A departments. That's where the CW, the whatever CWA alliance, those alliances, and everybody who's constantly fighting the company come out of those little QA departments. They've started all those unions for almost all of them in, like, for instance, a whole Microsoft umbrella.
And it's a tough one because it's you know the economy as a whole is changing regardless of president and things like that. Just in general,
Yeah.
the economy adapts, innovation comes out, and QA is something that not only do companies not need to invest in anymore from a technical standpoint, but we as consumers have become the QA,
Yep.
and they've been relatively successful in doing that. I mean, people used to sign up and try to be part of the Windows Insider program so that they could get early builds of Windows of Windows operating system patches and essentially test them for free and then report back to Microsoft, hey, this is an issue. This printer doesn't work. This scanner no longer functions. This port on my motherboard doesn't work, whatever. And so,
I mean, I signed up to be a tester for Google Plus.
like, that's what
I
I'm saying is, like,
volunteered and gave a lot of time testing that.
so why pay somebody any amount of money when Brian is willing to do it for free as a fan of whatever it is that we're discussing?
And
That
AI
also
can do the
makes this
basic
tough.
test.
And that's
Like
it. The basic stuff is
AI
done.
can do most of the stuff that finds the initial crashes, the weird movement glitches, all the things that you're paying a bunch of weirdos who move the mouse in weird ways to test. That's what they're testing. They can now do that with AI and create all that random simulation or just a ton of previous movement from a whole bunch of other people and see and have enough jitter and change to make it to where they're testing every possible situation in that game before it even reaches that initial set of free testers. Because then they're really testing, does this flow feel right? Did you get stuck and not understand how the quest flow goes? Those are the kind of things that people are usually supposed to be testing beyond, testing a bug over and over again. And so, I think that um and AI has kind of come together at a bad time for them. And I had another one here. One of those QA studios had they closed down. They've got a lot of pushback in the Microsoft side. I'll have to find that later. But this is something I think that now going forward, the economy around the world, are we going to be leading it again? Are we going to be pushing it forward? Are there going to be changes here that are going to make, because the economy around the whole world is seems like it's poor right now.
Yeah, that's
I
pretty
don't yeah,
accurate.
I don't know if it's better than here. Our economy here is really bad, but I mean, look at all the layoffs. It seems like they had the equal kind of layoffs all around all around Europe, at least, right?
Across the country, we are, still relatively close to what was a major economic event, which was
Yeah.
2+ years, if not more, of COVID-19 and all of the lingering impacts of that. So the
And
idea
the
that
amount of money we tossed out that affected the cost of our dollar, right? I mean, that's
absolutely.
been hitting people hard. The cost of everything went up so drastically, and then all these changes in how people do work. I mean, COVID, that was crazy enough where people all of a sudden weren't going to the office anymore, and it changed everybody's lifestyles. Like, I think we're still trying to figure out what normal is. It's only been 4 years for such
Exactly.
a
And
drastic change.
it has been, but there's also those other factors as well that so yes, I mean generally the world's economy is still coming out of it being, I'm not saying a depression, but it being depressed due to the situation that unfolded in parts of early 2020. And so yes, it is absolutely a nationwide or a worldwide thing. And like I've mentioned a gazillion times, and I'll say it for you again, Brian, video games are leisure activities. You don't need to play video games. If you have to pick up a second job to afford your life and to pay your bills, you are going to have less time to play video games. And so it is one of the things that people cut and don't do first. And that's one of the things that has hurt that industry so much.
One thing I wanted to mention really quick, because we're getting close to being done.
Sure.
Did you see the malicious code that was planted in the AI model at ByteDance? Did you hear about that one?
I did not, no.
So there was an intern who was fired, and because he had put malicious code inside of their AI model, and it cost the company tens of millions of dollars, supposedly. TikTok's ByteDance is denying it. Of course, this is a Chinese company, and they don't tend to acknowledge these types of things publicly because of, it's just whatever. But yeah, they supposedly an intern had sabotaged their AI model. It caused a bunch of issues. And he said that they issued a statement this weekend hoping to silence all the social media chatter, and claimed that, we're going to talk about facts. They said in a social media post translated and reviewed by ours, ByteDance clarified that facts about interns destroying large model training and confirmed that one intern was fired in August. So they're saying that something happened, but they're unwilling to, I think, talk about how big. According to ByteDance, the intern had held a position in the company's commercial technology team, but was fired for committing serious disciplinary violations. Most notably, the intern allegedly maliciously interfered with the model training tasks for a ByteDance research project. So, yeah, they claim
I noticed that you said fired. You didn't say fired and then killed.
Well, I mean, who knows where he's at now? Probably in a camp somewhere or something.
Yeah, probably.
But they don't want to kill him right away. That'd be too easy. Online rumors suggest that more than 8,000 graphical processing units were involved in the sabotage of that ByteDance lost tens of millions of dollars due to the intern's interference, but these claims were seriously exaggerated, they claim. So we'll see. You may never know exactly what happened.
We probably won't. Let's jump to this. This has kind of been in our news for quite some time. It revolves around, and it's kind of on the same vein of what we were talking about with IP and copyright and things like that. Yeah. PalWord, which is the game that was incredibly popular. I will admit, I'm going to pull up the Steam charts as I intro the topic on it. Essentially was an open world Pokemon game. It's not anywhere near as popular as it was 10 months ago when it had over 2 million active players on Steam, but it's got a healthy group of people playing right now. 10,000
in mid-20s.
Yeah, its 24-hour peak is in the mid-20s. So I mean that's not a slouch of a game. That's not a it's obviously of course fallen off from its peak. Of
course, that's on PC, not on Xbox, which will all have quite a bit on the Game Pass.
So there was a lot of questions. Okay, so you essentially ripped off Pokemon. You didn't call it Pokemon. You called it PalWorld. You didn't name any of the Pokemon the same thing. They had similar abilities and similar powers. And Nintendo, of course, freaked when this came out and they saw how popular it was because they could have done this, but they chose not to. However, over the last couple of months, since this game has come to popularity and now since it's drifted off, you've seen Nintendo make some seemingly is going down the road of pursuing potential legal challenges against the company, which I believe is based in Japan. They're not an American-based company, or Korea or something like that. They're somewhere over in parts of Asia. And we're learning now that apparently Nintendo is going through the process of strengthening specific patents that they have in order to make its PalWord lawsuit more robust. However, and I don't know how it works in Japan with patents. I don't think they're U.S. I don't think these are U.S. patents. If you go after the fact and change a patent, I don't know that, can you retroactively sue somebody for it? That to me just seems kind of odd.
Because if you're creating it and claiming that it's going to be something new that you're doing, well, then how did they do it first?
Well, it's not. See, they're strengthening a patent they already have.
Yeah, but that's usually accepted when they can prove that they've come up with a unique and original idea. They'd have to have some way to prove that it's old, right? They can't just come up with a new idea and say, hey, this patent, I want to have this patent, so that they can't do that thing they're doing over there. Well, if you just created it, then you can't claim that you're claiming that they came up with it first. Because they obviously made it before you, right? That's what a patent is. It's like proving that you came up with a concept to make something first. If they have documentation, if they have all of the art, whatever it is that's backing up this particular piece, and it's probably saying the way that these certain characters move, we're going to say we want to be notified that it's a Pokemon
I've got the example.
Oh, do they have the exact example?
There's two specific patents, and they relate to Pokemon Legends, and they focus on throwing balls to capture creatures in an open world, which is accurate, and the ability to use some kind of mount in order to get around the world on a creature's back. So those are the two Nintendo owned. It is a stretch, but it obviously there's additional context in that patent. But those are the two. Really, those are the two that would likely bode the best for Nintendo if they were to, which is hilarious because it's the individual Pokemon. Anything that's literally throwing a ball to capture something and riding a mounted character's back to travel around, which is pretty insane.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I don't know how this will go in court though. I mean, it
won't be in U.S. court, so who knows?
Yeah, and that's the thing is, it makes me nervous because like the riding a horse thing, sounds like, unless there's a lot of detail they're throwing,
there definitely is.
That sounds like a really generic thing to file a patent on, because look at how many other, Red Dead Redemption, all these things, you're doing something similar.
And games for 30 years have had that ability. So it's definitely something specific.
Now, why? You could easily change this if they would they be able to avoid this just by slightly changing the capture mechanism?
Absolutely.
Right now, you're throwing a ball. They could come up with something else that you're not throwing a ball. You're throwing anything, right? And avoid this whole thing.
Absolutely.
You're getting down on the little semantics of the shape of the object you're throwing, which is so silly to me. What's that have to do with a patent? The shape of the object that you're throwing, a ball versus a cube versus anything else. That's the craziness that they're getting down to that level to try to define this patent.
The only reason I brought this up is not to discuss necessarily the patent itself, but it kind of goes to what we were discussing a little bit earlier, semi, in regards to these older games. Nintendo, who has Pokemon, which is one of the most well-known, successful, profitable video game franchises that has ever existed, had the opportunity for a decade, if not more at this point, 2 decades, to build an equivalent game to something like PalWorld, and they failed to do it because Nintendo's a weird and sometimes very stupid company with how they do things. It's not even risky. They just don't like doing anything. Like they're just so weird with how they do stuff. And so it's frustrating that PalWorld had to come to the place that it was because Nintendo, with its rich IP, with its nostalgia for many folks my age, was just unwilling to touch it. So a third-party group had to make it. And I played a lot of PalWorld, not as much as others, but I played a good amount of PalWorld. And it was a lot of fun. I
Yeah.
thoroughly enjoyed every second of it that I played. Didn't play as much as I wanted to, but really enjoyed the game. And it's a shame. Yeah. And hopefully what comes of this is that Nintendo says, yeah, maybe we should act and do something with some of these IPs we've got to bring them into modern gaming, like an MMO or like an open world kind of style game like this.
Yep. But Nintendo is slow to act, and usually they're responding to something, and so we'll see. I mean, when they came out with the Switch, that was one of their more unique things that it seemed. I mean, they have been building up to that.
I would say that
with
wasn't
the Wii
unique,
and the
though.
Wii U.
Yeah, Nintendo's
But
been in the handheld market since the Game Boy, though. So I mean, that's not out the. It's a different kind of device.
There wasn't really any competition.
Neither was there was
market.
There was no competition for the Game Boy or the Nintendo DS.
Yeah, and we didn't really see. We got things late. If you look at, there was a lot of that market happening over in Japan.
That's very true.
That they had locally that we never saw. I mean, there's a whole bunch of handhelds that the United States only saw 2 or 3 of, but there's like 10 different variations of it. So
that's very
I think
true.
back then there was a lot of market that we just never saw, and so all of a sudden they appeared here. I think they were tried and tested there, and then we got the kind of polished version of them in the end. So maybe they're going to wake up and start making things again. I mean, they have the new Nintendo Switch that's going to be coming out soon.
Hopefully.
They're starting to put more games onto the Nintendo Switch that are like regular games. There's one I was seeing that's a PC game, or they have it on Xbox, and they're doing side-by-side comparisons of what they're able to optimize them to on the Switch, and they almost look like, of course the resolution's way different, but visually to you they look almost identical as what it looks like on a full-size screen when you're playing. I think they've done big things with that. Of course, they don't like putting out new hardware very often, so how often are we going to get another one? They're talking about making another one finally, but they're not going to put out a new piece of hardware every year. So people are going to get frustrated with that, and then another company's going to come over and take over, and then they're going to get mad and sue them because they weren't doing it right. It's this is how this cycle starts, and this is where they always seem to be reacting and get mad when other people get frustrated and start doing what they were doing better.
Well, and that's exactly what it comes down to. Because of Nintendo's own inability to innovate and do something with the unbelievable property that they have.
Hindsight.
It's not even called without hindsight. It was just because they just
have it's hindsight that they're realizing, oh, well, we should have done this.
No, I don't even think it's hindsight, because I would argue they don't even think they should do it. It's just something was successful, and because it was successful and somewhat touches what they do, which, I mean, let's be honest, PalWord's essentially it is Pokemon. I mean, that's exactly what it is.
I've never played Pokemon, but from everything I've seen, it seems like
that's exactly what it is. It's that completely, and the fact that they chose not to do anything with that is what is so damn frustrating. So
yeah,
we'll keep an eye on it, and I'll hop off my soapbox.
Well, all right, we ready to roll on out of here?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, hey, of course, if you want to find me, you can find me at Boise Computer on X. You can find me at Brian Aldridge on Gab, Getter, Truth Social, and other places. Of course, if you want to go to our website, if you go to infectionpodcast.com, check out on the upper right-hand side, and you can join our server on Discord. We got 11 ARC servers going there. We talk politics here and there. So if you want to go, maybe toss some links in the show news channel for us to review before the live show. A lot of ways that you can help interact with the show. If you want to watch it live, though, you can go to Twitch or YouTube. Of course, after the fact, we do upload to Rumble. We have our audio versions of the lower right-hand side that we're also upload those after the show are done. Whatever platform device is most convenient, pick that, and then you can go to the episode show notes, and we've got a video and audio player built right there if you want to use those instead, and then links for all the things we discussed through that live show. So it's a great way if you want to follow along, follow on and maybe watch a video or see a source news that we're referring to. And of course, you want to support us, we do have the support menu option up top, or you can go to infectionpodcast.com/support.
Mr. Brian, thank you very much as always, and look forward to things have calmed down with me now that the election's passed, so we'll get back on a more regular cycle for the show here as we close out the year. Well, actually, now that I say that, Thanksgiving, Christmas, it'll probably be just as screwed up. Nevertheless, continue to check our YouTube and stuff like that for the latest on that. Brian, thanks. We'll do it again next week.
Sounds good. Talk to you soon.
Alrighty, folks, you can check me out Monday through Friday, 5 to 6 a.m. on WBT Radio in Charlotte for the Carolina Journal News Hour. The easiest way to listen to that is either on YouTube or in your favorite podcast app. Just search for that. And, of course, follow me on X at Nicholas M. Craig, where you can also find additional details on that. If you missed any portion of today's show, maybe you want to check out some of our show news, including that oversight committee on FTC Chair Lena Khan, you can head on over to our website. It's infectionpodcast.com. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.